So we're gonna do a little fireside chat with Elliot. In full disclosure, because I know there are people who would throw it in my face if I didn't say it, I am on the board of directors of Two Cows Inc. for one more week. So in full disclosure, but then next week I'm a free person. So although it's been a great ride and I've really enjoyed it. So I want to start first, and we will have a little Q&A opportunity as well. So Elliot, what trends are you seeing in the U.S. fiber market, and what do those trends mean for local communities and community networks?
Yeah, that works. Seems on? Yes?
Yes, it is.
Yes, excellent. So, I think that as I was thinking about being here today, the thing that I would want anybody thinking about planning for building a municipal network to know is that all of the capital, and there's lots of it, that has come pointed at the transition from coax to fiber that's taking place in the US is all focused almost exclusively on figuring out how to get as much fiber into the hands of AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon as possible. So if you're thinking about building a muni, you really want to get to it, and you do not want to count on all of the private equity stood up platforms to be coming into your town to solve your problem. Because I can promise you that if they have their way, between 5 and 10 years from now, they'll be owned by one of those three companies.
So Ting owns and operates some of the networks it's built. So for example, Alexandria, Virginia, just south of here. But then others you've built and operate, but the community owns the infrastructure. So why do you think community-owned infrastructure, why should local communities own their infrastructure?
I've been personally really pushing for muni networks since before we were in fiber. We did a deal very early on with Westminster, Maryland, also just around the corner from here.
Well, 75 miles west of
30 minutes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a lot of corn there. I know that. It's kind of like Iowa.
But we did a deal in 2015 where I am telling you, myself and the active city council member made up the deal out of whole cloth. And we did it as much as anything else to try and create a model for the rest of the country to sort of look at and build. I think anybody who's been involved, I know you have, in muni and community networks, going back to the teens, the early teens, the mid-teens, a few of our fellow travelers out here today, it's been disappointing to see how few networks get built. The ratio, what we'll call inside of our building, the say-do ratio is way too high in muni networks. There is a lot, and I understand why. I mean, I've now been through this exercise so many times. I understand why. I understand what the challenges are and how difficult it is. But boy, the time is now.
But so what do you say? Because I talk to a lot of communities as well, community leaders, and they're like, this is a great idea. We absolutely need it. The incumbents won't serve us. But you just quoted me a price tag, so I'll just give an example. And I also just want to say, when I was at the FCC, I spoke at the lighting of the Westminster network, and it was really awesome. And people were, and a town of just 10,000 people.
Yeah, so
but it was transformed.
7,000 homes.
Right.
I only measure it by number of homes.
But anyway, when I talk to people, so I'll give you an example. So I was, and I'm sure some of you have heard this example before, and I apologize for that. So I went to Cape Cod a year ago, February. Don't ever go to Cape Cod in February. It snowed like 8 inches. It was miserable. I had 5 speaking engagements, and 3 of them had to become virtual. In any event, this is a pretty wealthy community, Falmouth, Massachusetts. And they were quoted, and there was a war between those that wanted to own the infrastructure and those that just wanted somebody other than Comcast. But they were quoted $35 million to build this network to about 35,000 homes. And the reaction I got from people, smart people, was like, oh my God, we're going to risk our AAA bond rating. And, how do you get people over the hump? And what happened was they got, well, just to finish the story, they got tempted by Tilson was gonna launch a network there, and then they screwed around and Tilson left, and now Verizon is building Fios. So at least they got their competition, but it's still high priced. It's not universal access. So how do you get people over the hump? What do you advise people to do to get over the hump, to get over the skepticism?
Yeah, look, I think that, and I didn't answer your question about, why build. Look, the reasons to build are you own critical infrastructure, you ensure digital equity. Look, I'll tell you a story about Alexandria. We ran into a little bit of a construction problem. It slowed down the build. The city wanted to change at one point the depth of the micro-trenching. Were we maybe thinking that there might have been some lobbying behind that? Possibly. But what I can tell you is Verizon cherry-picked the crap out of Alexandria. And then that makes everything less lucrative. So, if you're, you will not get fiber now to portions of that footprint. If you have a footprint that's uneven, it will get cherry-picked, full stop. The second thing is service levels. This allows you to hold a service provider at a minimum to a standard of customer service. If I said right now, it's like my easiest parlor bet, how many of you are frustrated with your incumbent mobile carrier or your incumbent, I just get a room full of hands, or I do it the other way and I get nobody to put up their hand. It is a parlor trick. Nobody is happy with that service experience. And then finally, we don't know where this stuff is going to go. What I can promise you about 20 years from now is it will be more important, not less important at a community level. We're working in some lower income footprint now, and it takes creativity working with schools, working with healthcare providers to try and make the total picture work.
Give me an example. What's your greatest success?
Sure.
Well, one of them.
Well,
there have been so many. But
no, not at all. I can tell, ask me my failures, that we'll have a longer conversation. Westminster I look at as a great success. Colorado Springs is on the road to a great success. But what makes a success, and I think that, a big part of the reason I wanted to be here today, I definitely wanted people to hear what's going on the capital side. I want that to be motivating or causing fear leading to action, because I think that's very real, and I want to see as much muni out there as possible. But understand well, it's not, when I say it's not for everybody, if it's gonna mess with your bond rating, that's a real problem. I can't say to a mayor with a straight face, this is more important than your water, your roads, your schools. Every situation is specific. That's kind of one thing, is that economic thing. The second thing is what do you have a utility or don't you? If you have a utility, you have a much greater chance of a successful muni than if you don't, if you have a local utility. And finally, it's understanding the administrative capabilities that your city has, because this is non-trivial. It takes, can it be done by 2 or 3 committed people? Absolutely. But having a couple, 3 great people is, not the easiest thing in a municipal government, right? And it's not the easiest thing in a business, right? So it's really understanding those capabilities and having a clean assessment. And at the end of the day, it might not make sense, but in so many cases it does. And there's nobody who's on the other side of that successfully who just at a caring for their community level isn't thrilled. And sorry.
Well, I want to take questions, but I just want to make sure that people know that Ting is available if your community is interested, but you don't want to be an ISP. I shouldn't be doing this sale for you.
No. Well, you should for one more week.
This is this is what Ting does, right? They build and they operate, but allow the community to own. That's what Westminster is. That's what Colorado Springs is. So if you're interested, this is the guy.
Yeah, we can go a little further. I really wanted to. I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people doing their planning. So we put up a draft contract. It's got a one-page summary. It's a full contract. These are our terms, first draft, based on our experience over the years. But what they, we put real numbers in there. So what we wanted to have that be able to do is to help any of you out there who were looking to try and do this to plan financially. We've got here's how much you'll get per circuit in that agreement. And we threw it up on tinginternet.com/muni. That's just a forward to a Google Doc. And, I can get you to that and Gigi can get you to that. But again, the intention there is to give you live bullets to shoot with. Look, I think that any of you who want to stand, so much, if you think about so much of the dialogue you hear, it's about raising the capital and it's about managing the construction. Nobody gives enough thought to the ISP. Those first two take 2 years, 3 years, 18 months. The ISP is around for 100 years. And there is no muni, unless they happen to have an old ISP guy or gal working in the city who should be standing up their own ISP. That is a particular skill set with, its own competencies. And so our intention there is just to help make that as easy as possible for people.
Okay. Anybody have a question? Okay, we got Matt, and then was that Christina? Raise your hand. Hi, Christina. I haven't seen you in age. Can somebody bring Matt a question? And again, please identify right there. Please identify yourself. We can only take 2 questions, but we will.
Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. Going back to the very first thing you said about the lack of financing for these projects and the emphasis on getting fiber into the hands of wireless carriers, I guess I'm curious, can you drill down on that a little bit more? Are you talking from a policy and public financing standpoint? From
No,
private
not
sector
at all.
Okay.
Most of the capital that's going towards building fiber, overwhelmingly, if you looked at percentage of fiber homes getting built, 95% is private capital. Overwhelmingly, that is private equity or infrastructure funds, both of which are almost exclusively eyeing their exits to one of those big 3. That's just the game, as I have learned the hard way. I thought I'd be showing up looking for capital to compete against 3 companies that are generally not well liked by their customers. Nobody wants to spend a nickel on that. It's certain that you can sell to those 3. So that's what they're looking for.
Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Culver with Imagine Idaho. We are the foundation that does all the capacity building and coordination in Idaho for their broadband plan.
Anywhere near Sandpoint?
The opposite of Sandpoint, but are you up in Sandpoint?
We're in Sandpoint.
Okay, I was actually wondering if I'd heard your name there, so I'm kind of curious how you operate. First of all, where are you based? And then one of the things that I find most difficult as we build these partnerships, typically we go for open access with a private provider or a provider like yourself who helps with the contracting and then does the, maybe you can give an example of how you do your contracting, but like a 30-year agreement or a 10 or 5-year agreement that's renewable. Except that we find that we have some fantastic different companies that are doing this in Idaho, but they really are limited regionally because they want it to be obviously in a connected, contiguous area. Because we're talking about in Idaho, we have counties with 1,000 residents, right? 300 people in a town. This is super high cost connectivity. But they're figuring out a model to aggregate it. Would you kind of talk to that a little bit, how you make that happen at Ting? And again, starting with where you're located and then how your business works. Because my big fear would be, well, is Ting going away someday as our operator and contractor to manage that?
Yeah, that's great. So we're fully remote. We have stuff all over the U.S. I'm in Toronto. There's not really we are wherever our fiber is because we do overwhelmingly most of our own installs, and so we have people on the ground doing installs and providing service. Some of those. First of all, I think that open access is a term I always push back on. The Utopia folks are here. I think there are 2 examples of open access in the U.S., and there are probably 100 networks that claim to be open access. The 2, to my eyes, being Utopia and AIM in Idaho. And I haven't heard much from AIM in a number of years now. There's just not a lot of ISPs that are on the partner side of this trade. I think I heard you mention, if I understood you right, that you have some great little ISPs in your portion of Idaho. That's fantastic.
Well, they're national companies. They're based in Idaho.
Okay. So I don't know the land mammal you're speaking of. I can't really conceive of who that would be, but there's not a lot of people on the ISP, the not their infrastructure partner side of the trade. So, when we're talking, we have 2 public, 4 private, 4 separate private partnerships. So 6 entities in total and probably a dozen markets. And, most of the people who are on the, what I call wholesale side, the netco side, who are building, the only people we're competing with are AT&T and T-Mobile. So, we don't know who else is showing up on the partner side. If your question impliedly was, would we show up for 1,000 homes? Probably not. But, if that was in Kootenay, right next to Sandpoint, then sure, right? Or Pend d'Oreille, I think, is right there too. It's that kind of thing. So you do need, you need to have a real business. I do think that you can have a real business at 7, 10, 12,000 units, though. So we have a much smaller, let me call it, efficient economic order quantity than some others might. So I don't know, did I answer?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I mean, I just want to know, I was curious about how you make these decisions. I mean, Gigi's really, and it's great that Gigi's saying, hey, I want to work with Ting.
Yeah.
Great, but would you really work with these smaller companies?
Again, yeah. How do we find Sandpoint? Well, Sandpoint, we built it, so we own the infrastructure there. We found them. They found us at a trade show. Sandpoint was trying to get a fiber network for years. They had 2 failed things. In the teens, people chasing me down at trade shows was our, kind of the way we got our first few builds. But these days it's and I should note, I put that contract out to help with planning much more than to generate leads. If we can work with somebody, that's great. But I just think that so much effort goes into the construction and the capital and not nearly enough into thinking about the ISP. So I just wanted to make that plug and play for people. So you can use that as a placeholder. Please feel free to take that and play with it. That there's no obligation to ever speak to us.
Okay, we need to close, but are you gonna be around? People.
I'll be around for a couple hours after.
Okay, very good, excellent. Okay, well, thank Elliot for a terrific talk, and we're gonna move on.
And thank Gigi for doing this for all of you.
Of course.